Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'll be reviewing and comparing the Wilson Blade V7 for both the 1619 and the 1820 patterns. My former main racket used to be the full black limited edition Blade 1619 in the countervail version before I switched to the Gravity Pro. As well as playing with a little bit of the BLX and the 2015 versions, I feel like I should have a decent idea of what the blade is about. As always, if you like these videos, please give it a thumbs up as it really helps me out. And subscribe to the channel if you're new, if you want to see some videos of me playtesting some of the rarest rackets, including a number of personal player frames and pro stock rackets, as well as any new interesting releases. Also follow me on Instagram if you want to see any of the photos of these rackets and my weekly update. Please write in the comments below if these videos are too long and in-depth, and if you would prefer a briefer, shortened format. So the Blade is what I consider a perfect transition racket for people who are looking to be introduced to a more advanced frame. Where it's not quite exactly a tweener racket, it also is not the most difficult to use if you're capable. It's an extremely popular racket, but one question that gets a lot of people stuck is which string pattern they should buy. Well, hopefully this video answers that question for you. Let's dive into the specs. Obviously they differ in string patterns. Both have 305 grams unstrung on average with a 323 gram strung weight. They have a 98 square inch head size with a constant beam width of 21 millimeters, which is considered a fairly thinner profile these days. Both have a balance of 4 points headlight or 33 centimeters and a stiffness rating of 62 RA, which in comparison to the countervail was 66. But the biggest difference between the two is the swing weight, with the 1619 averaging 328 and the 1820 averaging 334, where the countervail versions did not differ. Starting with the feel and stiffness, they have a much nicer and more noticeable flex than the countervail versions. They're both really nice to hit with, but people would consider more towards the muted side. If you're really bothered by the muted sensations, two ways you can improve it. One is by using a really crisp string, something with a very sharp profile like a Tour Bite or Vocal Cyclone. I don't think they would give you any discomfort in a racket like this unless you may be strung above 55 pounds. Also, if you're used to having a dampener in your racket, try removing it. It doesn't ping like most rackets since it's already muted to begin with, and the dampener might be an overkill. There's also no jarring on off-center shots, and it really boils down to a preference. It's not as muted as the countervail, but in comparison to most of the latest models out today, I would consider these rackets to be more on the muted side, but I'd say still a bit better than the pure stripe. So for feel and stiffness, I'd give it a tie between the two rackets. Moving on to power, the V7 blades are not really powerful by any means. They are on the lower side, but I wouldn't consider them underpowered, as you really have some extremely control orientated rackets out there, such as the Prince 93P, the Prestige MP, and the Ultra Tour V3. In my experience on my higher pace rally balls, the best feeling I could get was off the 1619, as it had a much better pop. However, by the time it was received by the opponent, it seemed to lose some of that momentum. So if compared to other similar rackets in this category, the Extreme Tour and the Gravity Tour, they have a bit more of an edge in terms of power. The 1820 provided a similar ball in terms of speed, but the trajectory was coming lower and would more often land in the opponent's hitting zone, which makes it easier for them to hit. For a flat out winner type of shot, the 1820 came in more handy because you were able to flatten out the ball easier, and because of the swing weight, it had a slight more ability to plow through the ball, resulting in better penetrating shots. For free power, I would give the edge to the 1619, but if you're a player that can self-generate heavy paced balls, the 1820 will probably work better for you in the long run. Speaking of trajectory, that brings us to the spin potential and launch angle. The 1619 had a much higher launch angle, and my subconscious targets are normally aimed towards the deep baseline or 3/4 court. So if you see my errors, they probably are more long than they are in the net, especially on the forehand wing. This means that the 1619 would require me to readjust my targeting, whether I would have to get accustomed to it for a couple weeks or consciously target shorter parts of the court to compensate. The spin itself was pretty decent, gave you the safety that you're looking for, but none of them would necessarily be used as a big advantage, and for me the spin wasn't bringing the ball back enough down sometimes, so I'd overshoot a little bit. If you're a flat hitter, then you're going to want that free margin, but margin is not necessarily something I have trouble with. If you want it to shoot off the court, you really have to take a harder swipe underneath the ball, as it's combined with a lower power level. And unless you want to put that in yourself, you won't create those drastic level changes visually for your opponent like you would with the Pure Strike. Slices were pretty good on both rackets. They provided an easy amount of depth, and the 1619 cut enough into the court if you really wanted to. The 1820 would obviously have the edge though, as the ball would just stay that extra bit lower. The 1820 had a launch angle that was much more natural for my game, since many of the frames I use tend to be tighter these days. It's also easier to keep above the net than some other 1820s, such as the PT 2.0, TF40, Ultra Pro, and to some degree the Gravity Pro. As for spin, paired with a very spin-friendly string, I think you get a good enough amount for an 1820 pattern. If you swing fast for most of your ground strokes, you'll be rewarded with a medium spin, pace, and high level of consistency. So again, for free spin, go with the 1619 if you want the extra safety margin if you're a flat hitter. The 1619 is a more versatile frame in terms of skill groups, but the 1820 could be arguably directed towards more advanced players. As for control, I somewhat alluded to this. Basically, if you feel like you have a low to medium level ability to generate pace, then you'll want to go with the 1619 pattern, basically because you're going to want that extra free power and spin, and combined with your own ability, it would give you a good balance between the two, where you won't feel like it's too heavy, underpowered, or lacks depth, and you'll be able to likely hit out and keep the balls in just fine. For my type of play style, which is more of an aggressive baseliner, if I play any competitions or tournaments, I'm looking to swing extremely hard and produce some very penetrating shots. The 1820 gives me the confidence to swing out completely and decrease the risk of overhitting. In my normal hits and rally balls, I found my consistency when using the 1820 to be much improved, where some of my general rallies that I would play, I would hit maybe on average an extra 3 to 4 shots before making a mistake. For me, using the 1619 combined with its launch angle was giving me too much height, and I was overplaying more than I usually would. Just keep in mind that it's not to say that I can't adjust to that over time, and the control isn't actually bad with the 1619, but for how I currently play at the moment, the 1820 has much more better control in my opinion, but that's something you would typically expect anyway. Let's talk about serves. The 1619 is a decent serving racket. I would consider some extra weight at 12 or 3 and 9 o'clock to improve its plow through. The countervail version was pretty unreliable in serves until you added the extra weight, and once you did, it became a very good serving racket. Kick serves obviously will be where the 1619 shines more. A free kicker and plenty of height above the net is what you're looking for, and works very well with the 1619. The 1820 is actually an extremely good serving racket. I could really belt out some hard serves with pinpoint placement, and it maintained its control and plenty of speed and penetration. It provided a great slice serve that really cuts into the ball and keeps it low, but for kick serves you really need to hammer it and make sure your swing doesn't hesitate, otherwise you might find yourself dumping it or overshooting without enough spin bringing it back down. So for serves, I would give the edge to the 1820. On the volleys, I don't think that either of them felt too cumbersome. The 21mm beam does allow you to cut through the air regardless of the swing weight on both. The 1619 suffered just a little bit of instability. In general, the volleying wasn't anything magical, but the improved feel of the racket allows you to be more connected on touch and drop volleys compared to the previous model. Again, adding a little weight to improve the twist weight is a good idea if that is an important part of your game. The 1820 is a generally much more heftier swing weight, and anything that is about 330 and above will provide you with a good amount of stability to deflect and punch volleys. Likewise, it benefits from the improved feel just like the 1619 version, so all around the 1820 would be a much better volleying racket. For stability and forgiveness from the baseline and the net, the 1619 was just okay with stability, but personally the one I was playing with seems to be an acceptable range. If you're new to what is considered to be a more advanced racket, I think the 1619 will do nothing but justice in terms of an upgrade to whatever you were using before. For the levels that hover around high intermediate to advanced, you're going to want to beef up that swing weight just a little bit to handle some of those opponents who can really hit out. Obviously, the stability is a non-issue with the 1820 coming in at a very high stock swing weight, and it is highly unlikely you need to add any weight to the hoop unless you get one that's severely under the average spec range. Forgiveness on both rackets was great, the sweet spot is more than enough for any player, and having off-center shots don't feel harsh and doesn't bring out any stiffer qualities in its flex. It generally feels fantastic throughout the string bed on impact. Stability is much more desired in the 1820, however the 6 points of extra swing weight may be too much for some people to handle, and the 1619 can be fixed with just a little bit of extra weight. Finally, with the maneuverability, newer players introduced to a more head-heavy orientated racket may struggle a little bit more with both rackets, but I think that the 1619 is much more playable in stock form with its ease of use. The 1820, I highly recommend adding some tail weight, as even for me I found it a bit too much weight in the head, but the difference between the E-Zone Tour and this is that you have much more space to customize that extra weight into the handle, and once I brought up the static weight to around 340 grams purely with extra added weight to the handle, that's when I could use it to its full capacity. The 1619 could also easily use some tail weight, but having either stock or customizing it did not have as much of a detriment to my game as the 1820 did in stock form. In summary, the blade line is an all-around player frame directed towards a higher level of skill and a perfect way to get your feet wet into a whole realm of different rackets. The 1619 version is a great all-around frame for newcomers being introduced to more advanced rackets that still want a slight bit more of free power and spin they are accustomed to, but a much heavier emphasis on control like they've never had before. It also suits players that have a more traditional flatter game using Eastern grips and driving the ball, but to be provided with the safety margins they may not receive from tighter patterns and even more controlled frames. If you are having quarrels with deciding what you need, you may be better off choosing this one as it provides mostly with what you need in stock form, and this versatile racket is made for many skill levels with room to move in customization. The 1820 is more suitable for people who know exactly what they're looking for, with much more stability and control and not requiring any free power or spin, but just a completely solid racket that will complement an advanced player in a wide range of categories and different playstyles. My personal recommendations for the 1619 would be to bump up the swing weight a little bit with weight at 3 and 9 o'clock and counterweight it in the handle to fix the balance. That will ensure that you'll be able to use it even as you improve your game, or if you're already a high level player, provide you with what you need for where it lacks. For the 1820, if the swing weight is too heavy, I would say if you can request one from your pro shop to be a lower swing weight, say around 330, you'll have an excellent racket without any additional worries. If you counterbalance the head heaviness and maybe use extremely thin sharp polys in the 19 gauge or 1.15mm, you'll definitely have a real weapon in your hands. Using thin sharp polys will allow you to also reduce the swing weight and provide you with the maneuverability that you're looking for. And there you have it. That wraps up my lengthy ass review on the Wilson Blade V7. I hope this actually helps someone decide on what to pick and it just didn't confuse you more. If you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching the video. We're trying to get up some new content as soon as I can, and I hope to see you guys next time.